In 2016, in Seoul, South Korea, a woman walks into a police station to report her ex-boyfriend. She says he secretly recorded her without her consent, and she wants to file a formal report. So the police call the man in, and he tells them he's happy to cooperate, he has nothing to hide, he says, and he'll hand over his phone to prove it. There's just one problem. The phone is broken, conveniently, completely broken. He can't unlock it, he can't show them anything, because what a coincidence, the device just happens to be dead, right when it matters most. Now, a lot of police departments might have stopped right there. No phone, no evidence, case closed. But these officers don't drop it. They send the phone to a data forensics company, the kind of specialized firm that pulls deleted and damaged files off devices that people thought were wiped clean, and they assign a technician to recover whatever is buried inside it. And here's the thing. This technician is good at his job. Maybe too good. Because he doesn't just recover a few files. He recovers almost everything. Photos, videos, audio, and over 200,000 individual text messages. 200,000. An entire secret history of someone's life, reassembled from a phone that was supposed to be unreadable. To do that job, he has to glance at what he's pulling off the device. That's how you verify the recovery is working. You have to actually look. And at first, it's just routine. But as he scrolls, something changes. His stomach starts to turn. Because these are not normal messages. He's looking at a group chat. And inside that chat, a circle of people are casually discussing serious crimes against women, talking about it, joking about it, sharing it, as if they were trading funny clips on a slow afternoon. It's so casual that for a second it doesn't even compute. And then he looks at the contact names in the chat. He recognizes every single one of them. These aren't random strangers. These are some of the most famous, most beloved entertainers in the entire country. And in that moment, sitting at his desk, this technician realizes he has accidentally stumbled into something enormous. Something that, if it ever got out, would shake the whole country. But then he realizes something far worse. Because as he reads further, the chat suggests that the corruption doesn't stop at celebrities. It hints that people at the very top, including police, may already be tangled up in it. And if that's true, then there is no clean authority he can hand this to. No safe officer to walk it over to. The very people he's supposed to report a crime to might be part of the crime. So he does the only thing he can think of. He quietly makes a private copy of everything, every message, every file, and then he gives the phone back, keeps his head down, and waits. 3 years. He sits on it for 3 years. And when it finally comes out, that single copied phone will detonate one of the biggest scandals in modern South Korean history. A scandal that brings down multiple celebrities, exposes police corruption reaching into the highest ranks, topples one of the most powerful companies in the music industry, and rips the mask off what was really happening inside the most famous nightclub in the country. This is the Burning Sun scandal. And to understand how a nightclub became the center of all of it, you first have to understand the man whose name was stamped all over it. His real name is Lee Song-hyun, but the world knew him by one name, Seungri. In the 2010s, Seungri was not just famous. He was a megastar. He was the youngest member of Big Bang, and Big Bang wasn't just any group. They were one of the most influential K-pop acts of all time. A group that helped define an entire era, that pulled in hundreds of millions of dollars in concert sales alone, that dominated charts and stadiums across Asia and far beyond. If you knew anything about Korean pop culture, you knew Big Bang. And if you knew Big Bang, you knew Seungri. But inside the group, Seungri always occupied a strange spot. The other members were celebrated as the prodigies, the producers, the rappers, the heartthrobs. Seungri was often cast as the underdog. So he leaned into a different image entirely. He became the funny one, the humble one, the relatable, slightly awkward nice guy who didn't take himself too seriously. And fans adored him for it. He felt approachable, safe, genuinely likable. He was, on paper, the very last person you would ever suspect of anything sinister. And here's what made him different from a lot of idols. He was relentlessly ambitious about business. While his bandmates focused on music, Seungri was building an empire off stage. Restaurants, a ramen franchise with locations in multiple countries, brand deals, cosmetics ventures, and he cultivated a very specific public persona to go with it: the lavish host, the king of the party, the man who threw jaw-dropping events. The press started calling him the Great Gatsby of South Korea. He embraced it completely. There are stories of him booking out entire luxury resorts and flying in crowds of wealthy, well-connected friends from across Asia for days of non-stop celebration, spending eye-watering sums just on the spectacle of it all. That was the brand, that was the image, and the crown jewel of that empire, the place where the Gatsby persona and the nightlife business all came together, was a nightclub in Seoul's glitzy Gangnam district. A club he helped found, sat on the board of, oversaw the publicity for, and occasionally DJ'd at himself. The club was called Burning Sun. When Burning Sun opened in 2018, it was an instant phenomenon. Lines wrapped around the building on weekends. Getting in became a status symbol all on its own. Just being seen there, just posting a photo tagged at Burning Sun, meant you were somebody. Within weeks, it was reportedly pulling in over $1 million. From the outside, it looked like exactly what it advertised: the hottest, most exclusive, most enviable club in the country. But underneath that glittering surface, according to what police would later allege, Burning Sun was running a second operation entirely. A hidden one. Here's what investigators say was really going on. The club catered heavily to wealthy VIP clients, a lot of them rich foreign businessmen and investors who came to spend enormous amounts of money. And keeping those VIPs happy was the entire business model. The legal side, the cover charges, the absurdly expensive bottle service, the parades of champagne that was real, and it made a fortune. But that was only half of it. The other half, according to police, was far darker. Women who came into the club simply to enjoy a night out, ordinary customers, not employees. Just regular people there to have fun with their friends, were allegedly targeted, secretly given substances, and harmed to serve those high-paying VIP clients. And this wasn't framed by investigators as a few isolated bad actors. It was described as something coordinated, deliberate, and deeply organized, hidden in plain sight behind the club's wild, anything-goes reputation. And for a long time, it worked. Not because nobody noticed anything strange, people noticed plenty, but because of a kind of collective shrug. Whenever a troubling story came out of Burning Sun, the reaction was almost always the same. Well, that's just Burning Sun. The club's chaotic, scandalous reputation became the perfect camouflage. Any alarming rumor got waved away as just the price of admission at the craziest club in Gangnam. In other words, the thing that should have exposed the wrongdoing its own notoriety was the exact thing protecting it. There was a steady drip of these stories. A couple where the woman went out feeling safe because she was with her boyfriend, and that very night, allegedly, something went very wrong anyway. A witness who walked into a hotel room, sensed that something was badly off, called the police, and was told that technically nothing had really happened. A young woman supposedly befriended and brought into the club by someone she didn't realize worked there. Over and over, the same pattern. Someone tries to raise a flag, and the flag gets ignored, laughed off, or buried. That's just Burning Sun. And at the center of how this allegedly worked was a substance, one that is misused around the world precisely because of how it affects people. And it is uniquely, troublingly suited to this kind of scheme. It can be colorless. It can be odorless. It can dissolve invisibly into a drink. A person can take a single sip and, within a short time, become disoriented and unsteady, able to move, sometimes even to walk and talk, but not fully aware of what's around them. and left with little or no memory of the hours that followed. But the most troubling part is what happens next. Because this substance leaves the body fast. Within hours, it can become nearly undetectable. Which means a woman who went to report what she'd been through, even one who went straight to the police, certain in her gut that something was deeply wrong, might be told that her medical screen came back completely clean. No proof. Nothing to point to. And in a society where women who came forward about these things were already so often doubted, blamed, and treated as if they were the ones at fault, that became a near-perfect shield for the people responsible. It made the whole thing far harder to prove and far easier for those responsible to avoid any consequences. So for years, the women who tried to speak up were brushed aside and silenced. The system that should have stood up for them stood up for the club instead. Until the whole thing finally cracked open. And it didn't crack because of a celebrity. It didn't crack because the police suddenly grew a conscience. It cracked because of one ordinary man and one terrible night. In late 2018, a man we'll call Kim went to Burning Sun with a group of friends. It was a celebration, they were just there to have a good time. And on his way out of the club, Kim says he saw something that stopped him cold. A woman being led out who clearly did not want to go. She could barely stand. She was reaching out, trying to get the attention of people passing by, hoping someone would help. And Kim did what almost everyone is too afraid to do. He didn't look away. He stepped in. He physically tried to block the man from taking her. The problem was, that man was a VIP client. And the club staff did not take kindly to one of their VIPs being interrupted. According to Kim's account, club employees pulled him outside into the street, directly in front of the club's own security cameras, and turned on him. It was not a minor altercation. It was serious enough that he came away with multiple broken ribs. And when the police finally arrived, Kim pointed at the cameras and said the words that should have ended it right there: "It's all on there. Just go look." Instead, according to his account, the officers went into the club, spoke with the staff, came back out and arrested him. The man who had just been hurt. The man who had tried to help. Kim walked away from that night with two unshakable convictions. 1. Something deeply wrong was happening inside Burning Sun. And 2. The local police were being paid to look the other way. And here's where one man's bad night becomes a national reckoning. Because Kim did not stay quiet. In early 2019, he started speaking out publicly, interviews, posts, anything that would carry his story. And then, he launched a national petition demanding a real investigation into the club. It exploded. Hundreds of thousands of signatures in a single day. It became impossible to ignore. The pressure built so fast that the president of South Korea himself promised the government would look into it. And this is the part that says everything about why so many had stayed silent for so long. For years, women had tried to come forward about Burning Sun, and they had been shamed back into silence every single time. But the moment a man became the face of the whistleblowing, the moment it wasn't a woman whose motives could be picked apart, people suddenly felt safe enough to add their voices. More and more women began coming forward, telling their own stories about the club. And crucially, many of them confirmed exactly what Kim had said, including the part about police doing nothing when they came forward. The dam had broken. And now, for the first time, the investigation had a real thread to pull. A thread that led straight back to that recovered phone and the chat logs the technician had been quietly guarding for 3 years. Because right around this time, those messages finally surfaced. And this is the moment the scandal stopped being about a single nightclub and became a full national earthquake. Because the group chats didn't just point to club employees and bouncers. They pointed to stars. Investigators and media reported that the chats contained private recordings of women, made and shared without their knowledge. They reported that the chats contained conversations that pointed to serious wrongdoing, and the names attached to those chats were some of the most cherished figures in all of Korean entertainment. Not the kind of people anyone would have expected. The wholesome ones. The idol's fans trusted with their whole hearts. I'm not going to repeat what was in those messages, because the women involved are real people, and they deserve far better than to have their experiences turned into entertainment. But you need to understand the sheer scale of the betrayal here. These were public figures with massive fan bases that were largely young and largely female. People who looked up to them. People who defended them. And privately, according to the evidence, these stars were allegedly treating women with a level of disrespect and cruelty that is genuinely hard to absorb. There's also a chilling detail about how they tried to protect themselves. The group reportedly had a habit. Whenever a chat got too incriminating, too many damning videos, too many damning messages of deliberately destroying the evidence, they would essentially blow up the chat and wipe it, so that if anyone's phone was ever seized, investigators would only find a fraction of the story instead of years of it. It was, in effect, a built-in insurance policy. Cover your tracks, delete everything, and assume you'd never get caught. Which is exactly why that one technician, the one who quietly copied a phone that was supposed to be broken and unreadable, mattered so much. They thought a smashed phone was the end of the trail. It turned out to be the beginning. And one of the names caught up in all of it was Seungri. When the chat logs and the allegations went public, Seungri and his team went into damage control. His father gave interviews insisting his son had been blindsided, that Seungri was just a busy idol who barely had time for the club, that he'd only lent his name and his fame and nothing more, that he was as shocked and disappointed as the public. Seungri himself denied real involvement. He denied bribing any police. He painted himself, essentially, as a guy who occasionally spun records at a club he didn't really run. And his fans desperately wanted to believe it. Because this was Seungri, the harmless one, the funny one, the nice guy. Surely he couldn't be at the center of something this dark. But the evidence kept piling up. The questions kept coming. And on March 11th, 2019, Seungri announced that he was retiring from the entertainment industry, framing it as a kind of noble sacrifice, stepping away so that he wouldn't drag everyone else down with him. The public did not buy it for a second. So what actually happened to all of them in the end? And this is where, for a lot of people, the story turns from disturbing to genuinely infuriating. Because despite the staggering scale of what was alleged the harm, the exploitation, the corruption, the cover-ups, the consequences were, by almost any honest measure, remarkably light. Seungri was eventually charged in a sprawling case that grew to include arranging prostitution for investors, embezzlement of club funds, habitual illegal gambling, and more. Because he had begun his mandatory military service, by the time of his trial military service is required of men in South Korea, his case went through a military court. He was initially convicted on all charges and sentenced to 3 years in prison, along with a fine of over $1 million. And then, he appealed. He switched his plea to guilty in exchange for leniency, said he would reflect on his actions, and his sentence was cut down to just 18 months, with the fine overturned entirely. He was released in early 2023. The other stars pulled down by the chat logs received their own sentences. One prominent singer and another well-known idol were sentenced to several years each, figures around 6 and 5 years, though those two were later reduced. The brother of a member of one of the country's biggest girl groups faced extremely serious charges. Prosecutors initially asked for the longest sentence of anyone involved, around 10 years. It was ultimately reduced to 4. And the police, the corruption that Kim had screamed about from the very beginning. The 2 highest-profile police cases ended in acquittals. A handful of lower-ranking officers were disciplined. But the senior figures allegedly tangled up in protecting the club largely walked away untouched. No grand reckoning. No sweeping reform announced. For the people at the very top, in many cases, almost nothing. And then there's the cruelest twist of all. Kim, the whistleblower, the man who got his ribs broken trying to pull a stranger to safety. The man who lit the match that exposed everything later faced his own allegations and a prison sentence of his own, which he said he would appeal. And to this day, people are divided on it. Some believe the charges against him were legitimate. Many others believe they were a convenient way to discredit and silence the one man who had blown the whole thing wide open. Either way, it added one more bitter, sour note to a case absolutely full of them. So step back and look at the full picture. A world-famous nightclub at the center of harm, exploitation allegations, and police corruption. Multiple beloved celebrities convicted. An entire web of crime exposed. And yet nearly everyone involved was out of prison within just a few years, many of them with sentences that had been quietly, significantly reduced. For a lot of people, the explanation came back to one root cause: a culture that instinctively shames and disbelieves victims, especially women. The exact same force that let these crimes go unchecked for years, victims being treated as suspects, while powerful, famous, well-connected men were given the benefit of the doubt at every single turn, was the same force that made the eventual punishments feel so impossibly small. In the aftermath, the fallout spread outward in every direction. The hotel connected to the club was eventually shut down and sold off. The founder of one of the most powerful agencies in all of K-pop, the company behind Big Bang itself, stepped down as CEO amid the scandal, with the company reportedly losing enormous value in the fallout. And years later, in 2024, the BBC released an investigative documentary on the whole affair, crediting two female Korean journalists who refused to let the story stay buried, and reigniting public attention precisely because, by then, almost everyone who had been convicted was already walking free. And Seungri himself, he has never quite left the news. There have been reports of him resurfacing in the nightlife world abroad, traveling frequently, and trying to leverage his old fame in parts of Southeast Asia, turning up in exactly the kind of headlines that suggest a man quietly testing whether he can find his way back. Whether the world will ever let him is another question entirely. So I'll leave you with one detail I genuinely cannot stop thinking about. Big Bang's fans had a name. A lot of K-pop groups give their fan bases a special name, a little badge of belonging, and Big Bang called theirs VIPs. The idea was sweet. It was meant to signal that to the group, the fans were the most important people in the world. Very important people. But inside Burning Sun, the word VIP meant something else entirely. It meant the high-paying clients in the back rooms. The ones being catered to. The ones being protected. The ones being served, no matter the cost to anyone else. Two very different kinds of VIP. The same word, the fans on one side, and on the other, the people the whole machine was built to please. And for a very long time, the people running that club seemed to care about only one of them. So what do you think should have happened to everyone involved? And do you believe a scandal this big can ever really be buried? Or does the truth always find a way out, even if it takes a broken phone and 3 years of silence to do it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want me to break down the police corruption side of this case in a part 2, say so below. I'll see you in the next one.